Good evening and welcome to the ITV News in London tonight. The spat over spit hoods. The mayor defends the Met's use of them. Why going underground is exposing you to more pollution than commuting by car. The Valentine's murder still unsolved after 10 years. Police offer a reward to solve the mystery. And
I feel that if a bearded woman can live on this earth in this day and age, then anyone can accept their bodies for the way that it looks.
the Londoner who wants every woman to embrace who they really are. We begin tonight with the Mayor of London apparently at odds with his own party stance on the controversial use of spit hoods. The hoods, which are being trialled by the Met, are put over the heads of suspects to prevent police from being spat at. Not so controversial, you may think, but Labour's Shadow Home Secretary and MP for Hackney, Diane Abbott, tweeted her opposition, saying there was no evidence that spit hoods are necessary or useful. Our political correspondent Simon Harris has this.
As you can see, it's a fine mesh.
These are the spit hoods being issued to all frontline police in Berkshire and Buckinghamshire.
It gets put on from the rear.
They're normally placed over a suspect's head, but here it's a policeman demonstrating how they're worn. Police patrols in London don't have spit guards as they're officially known, but a patrol dealing with a domestic row on the Isle of Dogs yesterday might have found one very useful. Two officers were trying to arrest a man in his 50s when it seems they were spat at. According to Scotland Yard, the suspect was thought to be infectious. Tower Hamlets police tweeted, 2 Response Team B officers blue-lighted to St Thomas's Hospital for emergency care after being spat at by believed contagious male. Earlier, Shadow Home Secretary and Hackney MP Diane Abbott infuriated police when she tweeted, no evidence that spit hoods are necessary or useful. Scotland Yard Superintendent Roy Smith replied, would you be willing to meet one of my colleagues infected with Hep C after being spat at? Diane Abbott later added, sorry, tweet has been misinterpreted. Police safety paramount. Happy to meet to discuss spit hoods.
The risk of diseases being passed through saliva is low. However, even when the risk is low, some of these diseases are not curable. They're treatable but not curable. So as an officer with a young family, children, do you want to take the chance?
In July, a commuter at London Bridge Station filmed British Transport police officers pinning down a 20-year-old man in a spit hood. The case is being investigated by the police complaints watchdog. Opponents of spit hoods say they increase the risk of a death in custody.
Restraint, particularly prone restraint, carries the risk of asphyxia. It means police officers can't monitor somebody's face and how they're responding, and that is dangerous.
Some Met officers are allowed to use spit hoods, but only in custody suites in 5 East London boroughs as part of a trial.
What's important is our police service who work their socks off every day, police officers going out to work every day, risking their personal safety and their livelihoods are looked after. That's why we've allowed spit hoods to be introduced in police stations. We'll look to see how the pilots work.
Scotland Yard says last year there were almost 150 cases of police officers being spat at. More than 200 were bitten. It will be for the new commissioner to decide if spit hoods are given to all police in London. Simon Harris, ITV News, Scotland Yard.
And you can tell us what you think by taking part in our poll, where currently 92% of you think police should carry spit hoods. But there's still time to have your say. Just search online for ITV London. Now, in the scramble to board a packed tube train during rush hour, your first thoughts may well be, will it be delayed? Will you get a seat? And possibly, why is this journey costing you so much? But it should be the dirty air inside the carriage which should be most alarming. The studies found the air inside some tube trains is more hazardous than commuting by car. Here's Luke Hanrahan on the underground health hazard.
Your underground commute could be damaging your health. A new study has found the air you breathe here contains more dangerous dust particles than anywhere else in London.
I think it is quite concerning because the concentrations that they were measuring in this study were very high. If these were genuinely sooty particles, they would be causing adverse health effects. The question is, are these sooty particles and what are their effects in cells?
Researchers studied the concentration of the smallest and most harmful dust, known as particulate matter, on the 3 main modes of transport in London. They found that while car drivers cause the most pollution, they are least exposed. For bus users, the number of dangerous air particles doubled, but concentrations on the underground were 5 times higher than in a car.
The report found that the air quality on the London Underground gets worse the lower you go, and it's at its worst in the carriage.
Once the air is sucked in, it goes through a filter.
Dr. Nerisse Liu looks at how the air we breathe affects our health.
For anyone who's ever been commuting on the tube, you know that when you blow your nose after being in a tube, it does come out a bit black.
She's been wearing a monitor that measures real-time data of the air she breathes on her commute to work.
You can see the level is elevated throughout the whole journey.
That's amazing.
At its peak, the air pollution spikes to potentially dangerous levels. The data shows it's on the tube that she's most exposed.
But what I didn't expect was the whole of my commute was elevated. So I was expecting more kind of peaks, maybe at places that I was travelling through, but not the whole journey.
For the engineers of the Crossrail project, protecting passengers from air pollution was a priority. The Elizabeth line designed to stop exhaust air entering the station, ensuring dust isn't blown onto platforms by providing a physical barrier between the platform and the track. The question is how to lower pollution levels on the rest of the underground, much of which relies on technology developed during the Victorian period. Luke Hanrahan, ITV News.
Some of the day's other news now, and the man accused of murdering banker Oliver Dearlove last August was looking for a fight, a court heard today. The jury heard how 31-year-old Trevor Timon approached Mr Dearlove before quickly becoming very angry and hitting him with a single knockout punch. Oliver Dearlove was declared dead 24 hours later. Timon has admitted manslaughter but denies murder. Grime artist Stormzy has tweeted a picture claiming police kicked down the front door of his house in West Brompton while he was in bed this morning after mistaking him for a burglar. Earlier in the evening, he'd been at the Elle Style Awards. Police told ITV News they couldn't comment on the incident. And police are looking for 2 men after a robbery at an optician's in Richmond last month. A woman in a pink cardigan, you can see here, trying to block the door of the shop to stop them escaping. But after filling their bags with handfuls of sunglasses worth £17,000, they pushed her out of the way and ran out of the shop. Next tonight, an unsolved Valentine's Day murder and the heartache of one family who today appealed for your help in bringing a killer to justice. 10 years ago today, 15-year-old Billy Cox was shot dead in Clapham. He was found by his sister, who appeared beside their mother today, asking for help in solving the crime. Our senior correspondent Ron K. Phillips now on the murder inquiry.
On the 14th of February at 10 a.m, I said goodbye to my son before going to work.
Billy Cox's sister Elizabeth, reading the words of their mother Arpawn, who agreed to stand by her side, but 10 years after her son was brutally murdered, is still too distressed to speak publicly. The rest of her statement is read by an actor.
I shouted to my husband, "Please don't tell me my son is dead." My husband said, "Yes, darling, he is." I fell to the ground and I cried until I had no tears left, and I wanted to die with him. I had to accept the truth that my son had left us.
Billy was just 15 years old. He was shot to death in his own bedroom, at home where he should have been safe.
It was his sister, who was then just 13 years old, who discovered her brother dying at the family home in Fenwick Place in Clapham.
Billy was on the floor, bleeding from his chest from a single gunshot wound. His sister would have seen this, rang for help. It would have been a shocking scene. Unfortunately, paramedics who came to the scene as soon as possible were unable to save Billy.
Billy's murder had a profound effect on residents on the small estate. There were no signs of forced entry at the flat, and detectives believe it's possible he knew his attacker. Forensic scientist Linda Brownlow is not part of the investigation team, but after looking at the available evidence, says the key to solving the case relies heavily on new witnesses.
We're going to be reliant on allegiances changing or witnesses coming forward. It is going to be very tough, but it can be solved.
2007 was one of the worst years for teenage killings in the capital. Billy was the third to be shot in 11 days and the fifth in 2 weeks. Unlike the others, his murder still remains unsolved, but his mother hasn't given up hope.
I am still always praying to God or Buddha that one day they will find the killer who shot my son so I can finally find the peace in my heart.
Billy's father died without the answers he wanted 5 years ago. Detectives hope the £20,000 reward will persuade anyone who has any information to do the right thing. Ronke Phillips, ITV News.
We are watching the ITV News in London. Still to come. The teenage sisters are fighting for women and why more of them should get more active. And the urban oasis flowering into a tranquil sanctuary in Walthamstow. But my first guest tonight has become a champion of women's rights as well around the world, speaking up both here and abroad. Harnam Kaur from Slough teaches women to embrace who they are and love every part of their body as she has done, and in turn becoming a star on Instagram. She's with me tonight to talk about what she's up to on International Women's Day, which is happening next month. Thank you so much for coming in, Harnam. Now let's start by talking about your beard. It's a symptom of polycystic ovaries, isn't it?
Yes. So with polycystic ovary syndrome, we have women have an imbalance of hormones. So they have more male hormones than female sex hormones. So that's the reason why I've been able to grow this lovely beard. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Thank
Absolutely
you.
Gorgeous. Now, what reaction did you get from people when you first decided to stop shaving it off and actually to wear it and embrace it?
I think there was a lot of confusion at the start. So a lot of people were, I think they thought, well, she's wearing makeup and she's wearing sort of dresses and skirts, and then she has a beard. And I think it was, and then they saw that I have breasts as well. So they're probably thinking like, you know,
Very
what,
confused.
I know, but I love being confusing. But yeah, I think there was just more confusion, but that just allows me to educate more people.
Now, you've got hundreds and thousands of followers on Instagram. It's quite a joy looking through all of your beautiful pictures. What's it been like now to sort of have people embrace and loving the work that you're doing, because you model as well as doing loads of other stuff?
I do. It's absolutely heartwarming to know that, you know, you can be different and there are loving people out there that can accept you and connect to your story too. So I think that's probably been the most heartwarming thing about being a public figure. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, you know, let's talk about strength, because it's not easy.
Yeah.
Is it?
No.
And all we sort of hear when it comes to social media is a lot of trolling, a lot of abusive messages, and you seem to have managed to flip that on its head. How are you able to do that?
A lot of people ask me where I get my strength from, and for me, I get my strength from being open about my flaws. So, you know, I am open about the differences that I have on my body and I celebrate them. So that's where my strength comes from. And on top of that, my haters are my motivators. They really are. They really allow me to power through all these difficult hurdles.
And I'm sure they aren't in the Guinness World Book of Records, which you are, for being the youngest female with a beard. It's incredible.
Thank you.
What was that like, picking that up?
Well, it was absolutely crazy because, you know, at the start of my beard journey, as we should say, I was bullied for it, and now I'm being celebrated for my beard and getting records for it. So it's just a whole, my life just turns around, yeah.
And what's beautiful is you're not just keeping that strength to yourself, you're also helping to promote that, to encourage other women to have strength too. And that's what this show is about that you're doing on International Women's Day.
So I have an International Women's Day event called Treasures Within, which I will be hosting at Box Park on the 7th of March from 6 till 9. And it's a free event, so everyone can come through. And yeah, and I'm literally doing it to celebrate women. I want to use my voice to, you know, celebrate women, and I will be doing a keynote speech there too.
Brilliant. And I'm sure that lots of women will be listening, because it's an amazing tale you have to tell of strength and everything else.
Thank you.
Harnam, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Now, on to two sisters now, who are also role models encouraging women to embrace their bodies. Almost half of women in London don't want to take up sport or be active because they're so self-conscious about the way they look. So the teenagers are spearheading a new campaign to encourage women to be more active. Here's our sports reporter, Amy Lewis.
Jiu-jitsu is meant to be about defending yourself, but these sisters are very much on the attack. They're attempting to get more women active.
I want other people, especially girls, to not feel embarrassed to start to do sports.
Many people sort of misinterpret what martial arts is all about. I think they say, oh, it's about power and very masculine, but it's actually kind of also very feminine, kind of like dance.
Laundrita and Blater are the faces of a new campaign which aims to break misconceptions around women in sport. The This Girl Can project was first launched 3 years ago by Sport England, who claim it inspired 2.8 million more women to get fit.
1, 2, 3.
But statistics show that 45% of women in the capital still fear being judged when they exercise. That's higher than anywhere else in the country. The sisters, who have a black and brown belt, say sports like theirs have many benefits.
It makes you feel safer when you're out in the streets. So if someone gave you a hook, instead of harming the other person, you could just push them away and run away or just walk away.
That's exactly why their father, who is a jiu-jitsu master, taught them the Japanese martial art. Ibush, who came to the UK 20 years ago as a Kosovan refugee, wants his daughters to be able to protect themselves.
It's good for them because, you know, we live in the world which you must know a bit of self-defense. And it's good for them. They, you know, even when they have friends and, you know, when they go out and they can tell their friends, look, I do martial art, and which for their health, for everything is good for them.
It is working. They are still just schoolgirls, but they can already floor their father. They both want to go into the law profession eventually. You wouldn't mess with them on the bar or the mats. Amy Lewis, ITV News.
After an absence of 2 decades, London will once again host the world-famous MTV Europe Music Awards this year.
And there goes the alarm ringing in my head, like somebody said.
Last year, the awards were held in the Dutch city of Rotterdam, where artists including Anne-Marie, who's from Essex, performed at the ceremony. Right, my next guest tonight bills himself as a conservative comedian. Plenty of material for him to poke fun at the moment then. No one is spared, apparently, least of all those who are liberal or on the centre-left of politics. Well, let's take a look at Jeff Norcott's routine.
Like, my wife's grandparents were moaning about the fact they might be taking away the cold weather payments. I was like, but you live in Alicante. And we've been told a lot of stuff, our generation. We've been told a lot of stuff like, you know, well, we had it a lot tougher in our days than you lot. You know, we had a lot tougher in our day. Well, how's that then, Grandad? Well, all we got for Christmas was a Satsuma. You're like, yeah, but you've done all right since then, haven't you? Bought your council house for £7.
Oh, thank you so much for coming in to talk to us, Jeff. We don't see many of you around in terms of being a conservative comedian.
Yeah.
How does that go down when you're performing to audiences?
Well, when I did the show at the Edinburgh Fringe, obviously I'm doing it in London on March the 9th, but I did it first at the Edinburgh Fringe, and I don't think... there were certainly people that thought it was a character act. They couldn't believe that anybody would be stupid enough to go into the heart of the liberal artistic movement and do a show about voting Conservative. And there was one woman who waited for me after the show that said to me, she said, just can I check... this is a character, isn't it? You know. I said, no, it's not. She said, you can stop doing the voice. I said, it's not a voice. This is how I talk. Because I think the fact that I was working class as well, so it was even, you know, just sort of muddied the waters even more.
Again, when I was talking to Harnham, did it sort of confuse people? It's that the voice is coming out of your mouth and you shouldn't possibly support the things that you support.
My surname should probably have a hyphen in, right? Yeah.
Now, I mean, you know, as you say, comedy and comedians tend to sort of come from a left-leaning sort of environment, which is doing really well in the States with things like Saturday Night Live and the Trump administration, for example. It feels like politics and comedy are really having a moment currently where it's incredibly popular.
It is as well. You know, with Donald Trump, he is... I wouldn't say he's a gift as such. I certainly think we're at an advantage in this country because even though I sort of vote right-wing, the brand of right that he is isn't where I'm at, if you know what I mean. And I think that one of the benefits of being in the UK is we're on a slightly different time difference. So we've at least got a few hours when we get up when the Donald's still sleeping. It's a bit like, you know, when you've got a baby that's sleeping, you get stuff done before they wake up and he starts tweeting and going...
I know, we're all sat there waiting for Trump's first tweet of the day. But, you know, when it comes to audiences, I read a review which said that audiences really start questioning their own beliefs having seen you on stage performing.
I'd like to think that was the case. I'm sure a lot of them just go away with more questions than answers, probably. But what I do is I'm aware that I'm kind of working behind enemy lines because, you know, the comedy circles are overwhelmingly left-wing and liberal. So what I've built into the show is a thing called a heckle amnesty, where people, if they get annoyed by what I say, they can just build up their grievances across the hour, and then at the end they can share them with me, because, you know, I think...
Do you get a lot of hecklers?
I have had a few, you know, particularly when I talk about things like the NHS and stuff like that. But I think, you know, I think if the one thing the art world needs more of, it's lefties having their say, isn't it? But
yes,
it's all good-natured, that's one thing I would say. And I think that the show has always thrived when I've had probably more people from the left than right, almost, because it kind of, that tension is good comedically to have.
Oh, well, Jeff, I look forward to seeing you in action next month. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
The ITV News continues with the national and international stories at 6:30. Here's Mary.
Charging for waste. The council's increasing costs to recycle our rubbish. As we reveal more examples of Grotspot Britain, 2/3 of local authorities tell ITV News they put up prices. Trouble for Trump. His national security advisor resigns over his relationship with the Russians. And full steam ahead. We're on board the first scheduled steam train in 50 years. Well, do join me for those stories and more at 6:30.
And finally tonight, how an urban oasis is taking shape in the heart of urban London. When the Walthamstow wetlands are completed later this year, they will be the largest in Europe, made up of 10 reservoirs, a retreat to escape to, and a place where wildlife will flourish. Martin Stew reports.
An oasis of calm just 7 miles from the city centre. This natural haven will become Europe's largest urban wetland when it opens to the public in the autumn.
We're now walking into the old pump house building, which not so long ago was a complete derelict shell, now turning it into an incredible visitor centre as part of Walthamstow Wetlands.
At its centre, a new community cafe and gallery. From up on the roof you can see the size of the wetlands, an area as big as 300 football pitches.
This area is Waltham Forest, and then beyond we've got Haringey and Hackney, and there are over 200,000 people who live within a small radius of this area. I think it's going to be absolutely extraordinary for people to know that this is in your area is a massive source of pride, for people to have access to green space, fresh air, to be able to come and learn about the wildlife. I think is going to be stunning.
The first of the reservoirs was built by the Victorians. They provided clean water for North London for more than a century, but for most of that time have only been visited by fishermen and keen bird watchers.
210 hectares, we've got 10 reservoirs here, it stretches for several miles, so it's a huge area.
Now with £8.7 million of funding and the support of Thames Water, it will be open to everyone for free.
The Walthamstow Wetlands project and the reservoir complex is obviously an operational site that provides water to millions of people across London, but it's a great opportunity to open up something that's could be a great asset to the local community.
There are new reed beds, nests for herons, and even the urban landscape gives a home. The peregrine falcons, particularly loving the pylons. The wetlands will be the final link in the Lee Valley chain. Well, this is a stretch of the new 1.7 kilometre cycle path, which, when it opens in September, will mean you can go all the way from the Olympic Park just down there to Enfield without having to cycle too much on the road. It won't be a high-speed cycle superhighway, but then who'd want to rush when there's so much to look at?
Now, Martin, I thoroughly enjoyed my walk over Waterloo Bridge this morning. It was beautiful.
It was. Well, the weather today has been actually a bit sunnier than I forecast. Don't tell anyone. But no, the sunshine sort of snuck its way through the cloud, which was really nice. The wind much lighter than yesterday. And actually, yesterday was kind of bitingly cold because of that easterly wind. It swung round today, bringing in warmer air, lighter winds, milder temperatures in the sunshine. It was really nice. And what a nice place to visit that was, incidentally. Yeah. When it opens, I think it's going to be great. Although you can't take your dogs for a walk if that's something you'd be interested in.
OK.
Anyway, the weather, as I mentioned, is staying mild. So whether you love or loathe Valentine's Day, at least the weather has been playing ball today. And actually, it's playing ball for the rest of the week as well, feeling notably mild as it has done today, compared with those cold winds we saw yesterday, and always some bright breaks around, despite there being a fair amount of cloud. A battle going on, really, between high pressure to the south and east of us and low pressure with some rain to the north and west. For us, in the southeast corner of the UK, you can see things staying largely dry, lighter winds, and those temperatures on the up as well. Out there tonight, well, a little damp in places, 1 or 2 very, very light showers. The main story really is, though, a fair bit of cloud around, and with that cloud, it is going to be a mild night, much milder than last night. Temperatures not dipping much below 7 degrees, and then a slightly dull and overcast start tomorrow morning. A little bit of mist and fog here and there, some low cloud around as well. For most part, the morning is going to be dry, but then by about lunchtime onwards, we start to see a little bit of rain just pushing through. The heaviest pulse is at about 2 o'clock. Temperature-wise, well, if anything, a degree up on what we've seen today, with slightly lighter winds as well. As we go through the evening, that rain then fizzles its way out towards the north, so a drier picture overnight. Possibility of some mist and fog then heading into the morning on Thursday. And then as we look towards the end of the week, well, things looking really rather settled. Not too bad for half-term if you're looking to get out and about, because temperatures nice and mild in double figures the whole time. The really good news is it is going to be largely dry. A fair bit of cloud around, but there will always be 1 or 2 bright breaks as well for us all to enjoy. I'll see you later. Goodbye.
Well, that's it from us. We're back with the latest after ITV News at 10. Coming up, Mary Nightingale with the ITV Evening News. But from me and the rest of the London team, enjoy your Valentine's evening. Goodbye.